that's interesting. They set even bigger parameters to reality. How should we say it? It's like the Native Americans who had the calendar that went 484 billion years into the past or something like that. Some ridiculous amount of time, way more than has happened since the Big Bang. Way more time. So he's setting things here. He says that things are, whatever the substance is eternal and ageless. Energy might be eternal and ageless in some sense. Never, it can change form, but never passes away. But even electrons decay. Did you know this? Atoms decay, sure, uranium and stuff, but the electrons atoms are made of are decaying. So let us continue. And besides, number 4, so we skip from number 2 to number 4 now, and besides this there was an eternal motion in which was brought about the origin of the worlds. Give that the Big Bang. One of the very, very first thinkers, these are just some little blips from his book. Now, with regard to these references, it should again be remembered that many of the terms, material cause, first element, for example, could not have been used by Anaximander himself. We may assume his actual language to have been somewhat poetical, and can be sure only that he did use the words infinite, boundless, and that curious phrase about injustice, which we skipped. Now to Anaximenes, Anaximenes. The third of the philosophers of the school of Miletus is Anaximenes. We have no precise dates for his life, and know only that he was a younger associate of Anaximander. Now, Anaximenes says that the underlying substance was one and infinite. We've heard that before. And he said it was air. So the one guy said it was water, the one guy said it was air, the other guy said it was infinite, and we can never know what it is, but it's there, it's ageless and timeless. From this air, Anaximenes holds, the things that are and have been and shall be, the gods and things divine, took their rise, while other things came from its offspring. So even the gods, he says, everything came from the stuff that existed, from existence. This is the primacy of existence. These philosophers, remind you, are setting the stage for the Golden Age. Continuing page 18, we are now for Pythagoras. We'll spend a minute or two with this gentleman. What is known as the school of Miletus ends with Anaximenes. That these particular Ionian Greeks proceeded, for the time being, no further with their speculations and discoveries, may be associated with the fact that before the death of Anaximenes, the Persians had occupied the Greek Asiatic coast. So later on they end up fighting Persia. This is the period when the Persians took that area over. Before that, for example, the kings who invented coinage from Lydia, which is on the end of Turkey there, on the Aegean Sea, they were not under the control of Persia, but later on that land was. The next schools of philosophy appear in the Greek cities of southern Italy, and the next philosophers are also Ionians, again. Of them, one of the most important and elusive is Pythagoras, who came from the island of Samos, probably about 531 BC. He settled in southern Italy and there founded what amounted to a religious order. His society appears to have had political as well as religious and philosophical aims. It was certainly suppressed at some date, between 460 and 400 BC, although survivors of the society carried on their teachings in mainland Greece. With some of these, Socrates was acquainted, and their doctrines undoubtedly influenced Plato. It is impossible to say what precisely Pythagoras believed himself, and very difficult to be sure of what his followers believed. One certain fact seems to be that he, for the first time, made philosophy into something which we would call a religion or a way of life. So, where philosophy comes in and is trying to secularize things, Pythagoras says, okay, let's take this new secular thing and make it essentially religious. He had some weird things. Don't eat beans. We'll get to him in a second. Okay, later it was regarded as reasonable to suppose that the gods exist, whatever those are, but that they have nothing whatever to do with mankind. However, in the 7th and 6th centuries there seems to have taken place, particularly in Attica and in the Greek cities of Italy and Sicily, something that can be described as a religious revival, oh goody, in the 7th and 6th centuries, the 6 and 500s BC. We find that the gods themselves, and in particular Apollo and Dionysus, are taken much more seriously than they were by the adventurous scientists of Ionia. Oh, to the golden age of Ionia we can hearken. We find also a different outlook on man. A real distinction is now made between the soul and the body. So there's a dichotomy that's been formalized. Ecstasy, the stepping out of one's self, is acknowledged as a fact and investigated as a hint of some divine origin of the soul. So people really believed you could leave your body. There is speculation about life after death, and rules are laid down for pure living, which may ensure benefits both here and hereafter. We skip just a bit. It is sufficient to point out that this religious movement had its effect on Pythagoras, and through him on the subsequent history of philosophy. With him, philosophy enters, as it were, another sphere. Instead of being simply curiosity or science, it becomes a way of life or a religion unto itself, a substitute for a religion. Yet, it remains concerned with the problems first raised by Thales. The underlying substance or principle is still sought for. Now, let's just say Pythagoras was crazy. Pythagorean theorem and mathematics and stuff is all fine. They thought numbers were a glimpse into the deeper meaning of the universe. Here are some of the things Pythagoras said. Do not eat beans, do not touch a white cock, do not stir fire with iron. When you get out of bed, roll up the bedclothes and smooth out the impress of the body. Roll up the bedclothes. So not just make the bed, but make sure that there's no impress of a human body in the bed before you're done. Make sure of that, sir. A prudent man would. Xenophanes, is also from Ionia, probably left his native city of Colophon, C-O-L-O-P-H-O-N, at the time of the Persian conquest in 545 BC. He may then have been about 25. The rest of his long life, he lived to be over 90, was spent in the Greek cities of the West, mainly it seems in Sicily. He wrote in poetry, and a considerable number of his verses have survived. He seems to have been rather a critic of ideas than an original philosopher, but his criticism is important. It was concerned with both social and theological ideas. We know from Pindar, a contemporary, how strongly and beautifully developed was the cult of athletes in Greek cities of Sicily and Italy. Victory in the Olympic Games was something which was brought to the victor almost divine honors. The gods themselves, in the fine poetry written to commemorate these victories, are often given the qualities of athletes. Xenophanes applies both to the social and to the religious theory the keen edge of Ionian rationalism. Quote, "Our art," he says, by which he means scientific inquiry, economic and political efficiency, the art of thinking and applying rationality, "our art is a great deal more useful than the strength of men and horses." End quote. Snub-nosing the Olympic Games. It is the same view as that which we meet later in Aeschylus, A-E-S-C-H-Y-L-U-S, who makes Prometheus declare that the future dispensation, the way of progress, is to be by means of intelligence rather than brute force. Most remarkable are Xenophanes'